Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about the classic. I still haven't quite named it, but it's based on, profiling and compliance and investigations, classes I took 20 something years ago, and then I kept updating them. And it's the kind of class I never really thought I was going to teach to people for a lot of reasons. One is I look at it this way. When you learn NLP, especially the basic level, right? It's like X-ray technology, in my opinion. It kind of looks through and it sees the skeleton of what's going on in other people, right? Which is 90% more than I would say even the psychologists know, right? So that's one of the reason. A lot of people underestimate the power of just the basic NLP. When you understand mirroring and matching, and you gather the info and the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, and may have changed. Of course, I took my training in clinical psych over 30 years ago. They didn't teach this stuff. They were too busy discussing Freud and Jung and these deep theories, not to make fun of it, but it was guys that were tenured psychological professors that never had to really prove hardly anything they did. They were, they got paid twice a month. So they didn't have to do it. So there's a difference, and not that there's anything wrong with that. They do great research and all this other stuff, right? And some of the stuff that they studied is absolutely fascinating. The Milgram experiment, to remind you of that, this is where this is going, right? Where they proved you could get average people to almost commit atrocities, if you want to say that, where they would literally shock people to death, right? Because somebody in a lab coat, perceived authority, came in and told them they had to do this. So, if you don't remember the experiment where they had them, they took two groups. One was the group that was going to be administering shock, and they said it was a study about testing, and every time somebody got a wrong answer, they shocked them, and as they got more wrong answers, the shocks went up to fatal level, and you could hear people, it was actors, but you could hear them screaming. The people kept shocking, right? So we act like, oh, you can't get people to do these, they always say in hypnosis, you can't get people to do things they don't want to do. Yeah, Billy says up to 450 volts, which could be fatal, right? Which I like that saying, oh, we can't get people to do things they don't want to do. But all you got to do is look at the world. There's not a lot of stuff people won't do, given the right context and things that are going on. So anyway, and who studies this the most are, how to get people to comply, how do these things happen, are organizations like the military, not just our military, all militaries, intelligence agencies, and usually like law enforcement, because it's very important. So anyway, and I was lucky enough to learn some things, but I never thought I'd teach it because it's very powerful. So NLP, which was, I thought, just great, for that, the basic level, gives you that X-ray look. And then when you add what we teach in the Master NLP at NF-NLP, our kind of people, we learn the language patterns, the magic words, which kind of bypasses the critical factor. We teach really effective waking hypnosis techniques without going into the Ericksonian mog of ineffectiveness. So, which was fun, right? But now, in the last few years, I've started studying more and more neurology from a different standpoint, mainly to get my CEUs for my psych license. But the things we know about, how the neurology works has changed everything, right? At least to me. It goes back to addictions. I speak a lot on addictions. It was considered a social ill. Was it nature? Was it nurture? And then back in the 90s, they started to realize it was a brain-based disease, how it works in your brain, right? And then now it goes all the way through, and genetic component of it. And now we know it's not just in your brain, it's how it affects your brain in a different way. right? The study I always quote, where they took someone that drank too much or was drinking primarily. They did it with other drugs, but drank too much. So they fit the criteria, if you want the clinical thing, they fit the criteria of substance abuse. We don't know if it was dependence, right? And they put them in an MRI and had them think about, show them their drink of choice. Well, some people, their prefrontal cortex lit up. What that meant, they were thinking about it, and then they could make the decision to do it or not do it. Right? When you think about something, you can run the scenario. I got something to do today. I have a presentation, got to get up tomorrow. Fine, you could do it or not do it. But another group, their prefrontal cortex went dark, and their midbrain, their amygdala, their deep brain, their survival brain lit up. So they skipped thinking about it and went to craving it. Right? So that's a brain. You can't override that a lot of times just with thinking about it. Right? And again, and people from the outside don't think it's that big a deal, especially if they could have a drink or not have a drink, or smoke a joint, not smoke a joint. But the people with it, it's like, oh, it began to show that. Now we know how much of what's going on in our brain is actually based in our neurology, going back to our DNA. One way to look at it, if you want to talk about influence, we call it influence, persuasion, compliance, if you will. It's almost like, it's not so much a pyramid, but we could use the example of a pyramid. Thoughts are like electric, right? And what that means is your thoughts are in your prefrontal cortex. You can think about them, not think about them. You have thoughts that aren't really emotional. You can weigh factors. You can look at things. This is, as we were talking about in the law of attraction, this is where most people start looking at the law of attraction. They think about things, right? Which is nice, but there's no connection at the emotional level. So if you have at the top level, if it's like your thoughts, which are kind of electrical activity, the next level down would be more emotions, where then once your emotions get involved, then your, your chemicals kick in. The dopamine, the serotonin, all these chemicals kick in, which add the emotional component, right? Which can affect your behavior. So you have your thoughts, then you got your chemical reaction, and then you have your behavior, which is like patterns that you do. Now, all of these begin to interact, right? If you run a pattern, if you start a behavior, you may get the thoughts about it, and then your emotions will get involved, right? And at the deepest level is your DNA. This becomes impulse, right? When this gets the deep part of your brain, it kicks in your survival mode, right? Which is your brain is always looking to stay safe and secure. As my friend calls it, existential threats in the external world. Your brain's always looking for that, right? And again, we'll judge those existential threats by other things, but we have the existential threats. We're looking for, food, shelter, all of those kind of things. Procreation, that program is always running, whether we want to admit it or not, because this is what's going to keep the genetic pool alive, right? So that's again, going back to when I talked about the people with the addiction and thought about their drink, it bypassed everything, went right down. Basically, it became a survival mechanism. They need that drink, that drug, in order to live. They feel like they'll die if they don't get it. That's what withdrawal really is, right? Even though intellectually and physically it's not going to kill you, right? I've seen people go through bad withdrawals. It's not comfortable, but rarely is it fatal, right? In fact, the hardest drug to withdraw from is alcohol. That's the one that has the most fatalities, right? And then benzos. And then certain heroin and opioids are not as bad as people think. I mean, it's bad, but you're not going to die. So anyway, so what we want to do is begin to think about bypassing that. And the reason I haven't taught it is, again, it's more like an MRI. I use that term. If NLP and even some of the hypnosis skills gives you the X-ray of how people think, you know, like a flat look. If you look at an X-ray, it's two-dimensional. You see the bones, great. You can see a broken bone, right? So in NLP, you can see somebody, okay, they're dysfunctional at this level, you know, and what's driving it at the base level might be, you know, how they're thinking about it. So you could set the bone. It's just the analogy I'm using today. But this stuff goes to more, it's more like an MRI. You begin to see people in a three-dimensional world. Well, two things happen. That's one's kind of cool, one's kind of scary. One is you realize how people are flawed and we're all broken at some level, right? And so it sees people differently, right? But then it's the next level of getting people to be able to influence, right? To get compliance, to get people to take actions that may or may not be against their best interests. Okay? So when you look at like the truly elite people in investigations, FBI, CIA, the New York City Police Department has those people that come in, right, that are great investigators, right? And when they're doing the investigation, when they're doing the, you know, the interview with the thing, they get compliance. They get people to admit to a crime, right? Usually very fast. And they do it in a different way, which would, you know, intellectually, it's against their, you know, their self-interest to admit to the murder, the whatever the bad crime is, right? And yet, how do they do that? Well, it has to do with how they're looking at this. Again, their thoughts, their emotions, their patterns, their DNA, right? You know, and it's about the perception and things like that. So that's why I've never really taught it. Plus, it was kind of hard to teach. But now, with all the stuff about the neurology going on, it makes more sense and it's easier to do. And it's out there. You know, they're constantly dumping information under the Freedom of Information Act. The ones you get that's not all redacted, right? But it's like, oh, this is how they do this. This is how they set up the interrogation camps. This is, you know, the thinking behind everything that they do, right? In those organizations, right? And so, you know, I never really, you know, it was one of those things I was going to teach. I've been asked for years. You know, I went to the FBI Academy, or they called it the hostage course when I was there, and it switched to the crisis negotiation course. It sounded better. And then a couple other things I got to do, you know, with profiling and a few of the other things. And so, and I was there as just, they asked me to come. I got invited. I went, stayed on Quantico. One was a 2-week class, one was 5 days. And all they just wanted my feedback. It was kind of a flattering thing, right? Scary part was they knew everything about me when I walked in there, you know. Well, but this was in 2000. They knew everything I've done. They quoted stuff I've written. You know, it's like, oh, it is true. And this was, you know, internet was still kind of new then. So I'm like, this is interesting. But it was fun. I got to hang out. You know, I was the only one of the few. In one class, I was the only non-badged professional in the room. Right? You had a couple of psychologists and social workers, but they were also police officers or agents or worked for an agency, our government, or as my friend Billy would point out, the FBI trains, half of their classes are always foreign nationals. That's how they network with other governments, right? So anyway, it was fun and I got to learn a lot. And, you know, they just wanted a debrief after I was done. Right. So, you know, my thoughts, but I got some cool information. It was a lot of fun. Right. And it changed how I thought. So I always thought I was going to teach it. And they didn't make me sign they really didn't make me sign an NDA. Right. They just kind of hinted, don't teach certain things, you know. So, but then what happened is like I said, with neurology, all this stuff started making sense. I see information out there, most of it wrong. And so I kept thinking I was going to teach it. And then a couple of years ago, I lose track of time, but a dear friend of mine, one of my best friends, and a true mentor of mine passed away, Elsa Meldridge. from the National Guild of Hypnotists. He was a true mentor, knew him since the 80s, right? And he always had this class he was going to teach on Jungian psychology. He had all these, I mean, he had original prints from Jung because his dad was a Jungian scholar, you know, I forget what kind of minister his dad was. So he had all these papers and he kept meaning to do it, but then life gets in the way. I don't know if anybody can relate to that, right? And then he never quite put the class together. He was working on it. And then when he was really started getting ready to do it, he had some health challenges where he couldn't do it. So I was talking to him about, and he sent me some stuff and we were going to, you know, get it launched. And then, you know, he made his transition. So it never got done. So that's kind of been in the back of my mind. And then this a couple weeks ago, I was at a conference and another person I've known, more an associate, a colleague, interesting guy. His name's Roy Hunter, expert in parts therapy. Well, he had a heart attack and a stroke at the conference. Right when the conference was starting, they took him away on a stretcher. And same thing, he had all these classes he was getting ready to teach. And somehow this is eating in the back of my mind. It's like, you know, the one thing we all share, whatever our political, religious, personal beliefs are, the one thing we absolutely all share is mortality. And we all share that we probably don't know when it's going to happen, right? And that's a safety mechanism. If you knew the day of your death, you'd probably kill yourself, right? So I said, well, maybe I'll put this together, right? So then I had to go back and look at it. So that's why I'm putting the class together, and I'm going to be teaching some things that are a little bit different, you know, on how to read people. Again, you got your visual, auditory, kinesthetic in the NLP world, you know, the meta model, the information gathering. At the advanced level, we teach, you know, the meta programs. Do you move toward a goal or away from a goal? Are you a big picture person? Are you a detail-oriented person? You know, are you a team player? Are you an individual? All this has been around for a long, long time. And if you know that information, it's like you can read people, you know. If you know somebody is a big picture person, you know, team oriented, you talk about the big picture for their team. This is what it'll do for their team. Da, 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 da. And then we add in the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, you know, boom, we got this level, right? And for most people, that alone, you're in the top 10% of the world. You have more information on how to really influence and impact people than I would argue, because I'm in the club, than most psychologists, right? Social workers, change agents, right? Salespeople. Well, so what would be the next level, right? Well, the next level, we get into, like, you know, how do you get people at the next level to get them to do things, right? Well, it's a lot of fun if you're going to do it. Well, the first thing is, like, when we teach rapport, the mirroring and matching. You know, we teach mirroring and matching, right, at the basic level. And, you know, which gets you in rapport. You know, just the physical mirroring and matching will get you in rapport. And then if you add the other levels we just talked about, the sensory acuity, the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, deeper level of rapport, and then we have, you know, other levels, but that great stuff, right? But there's a deeper level of rapport that very few people ever teach or know about. And that is, you know, the importance of harmonic resonance. Okay? And when rapport can fail. When you first learn rapport, especially the mirroring and matching, people are afraid to do it because they say, I feel funny, you know, and people catch me. Well, if you back up to what I'm going to talk about next, it makes sense. You know, to use a weird analogy, if you walked into a guitar store and, you know, and all the guitars are up there, and you struck a certain string, all the other strings on the other guitars at that note will vibrate slightly. You know, it's called harmonic resonance, right? Piano, if you have a room full of pianos and you strike a middle C, all the others will slightly resonate at that level, right? Because things are always trying to get into harmonic resonance, right? So that's what happens if you're trying to mirror match, right? And you have some disconnect, some discord, thus the word discord, right? Other people subconsciously will pick that up, right? Because your brain's not just tracking visual, it's doing all this, but there's other things going on, right? So you have to learn to control that. So to go to the next level, like the elite investigators, operatives that get information, they have to present a blank slate. They have to present somewhat of a blank slate. And what makes sense to me is when you're looking at that, how do you get harmonic resonance? Sometimes the easiest way is to take a note from actors. Okay? Take a note from actors. Really good actors are able to present great performances and get people to connect with them, right? Without sometimes showing a lot of emotion, right? You hear the really great actors, Anthony Hopkins, De Niro, I mean, the list goes on. Sometimes they talk about like, oh, that scene you were doing, like, Anthony Hopkins, when he's doing Silence of the Lambs, there's a couple of scenes, and they go like, what were you thinking? What emotions were you going through your head? And contrary to what some people would think about, like method actors, a lot of them would say, nothing. I tried to remain blank, right? Because if you get the rapport at the beginning, and you're doing the actions that the other people see as rapport, right? They will read what they want into that, into what they're seeing. So if you're watching a performer, acting, they call actors actors, not orators, not speakers, not magicians. They call them actors, which is action. It's the actions that they're doing, right? And they let their actions lead the audience to where they want them to go, right? And so sometimes by just presenting that blank slate, it gets the next level of rapport. This takes practice. It takes training, especially if you're talking or trying to get in rapport with somebody that it lights up something in you. So you're getting an emotional response, which that harmonic resonance will set off in them, and you'll get that discord, right? And so first level is you have to begin to do this, right? And then, it all goes back to your neurology and how things work, right? Because all of our needs, there's all this stuff on, they call them human needs or social needs, things like that, like significance, approval, novelty, intelligence, pity, strength, right? Well, the fact of the matter is there's no such thing as a human need or a social need. They're all neurological needs, right? And the ones that at the deepest level, they're setting off parts of your neurology, right? Usually it's your midbrain. It becomes a survival thing. So like in the model of the big six of what people would say they need, things like either significance or approval, novelty, intelligence, pity, right? Or strength. They want that because it's lighting up their survival mechanism. Without it, they do not feel alive. If you don't acknowledge that, like, significance people want significance, visibility, right? They're easy to spot. They'll have the Rolex on, right? They'll have to tell you what kind of car they drive, right? How the awards they've won, the books they've written, right? And, if you want to get in rapport with that, you just have to acknowledge it and basically feed their strength. Let people know they're significant, not strong, but significant. You're making such a thing, right? So you have your significance people, you have your approval people that need approval. We've all had those, especially if you're a clinician or a salesperson. The people that ask for permission for things they shouldn't have to ask, they know they don't. Can I have a Kleenex? They're on my desk. They're there because, in case you cry, but they have to ask. They need the approval, right? So, a lot of your dysfunctions there was I read a paper that people with eating disorders are usually a high approval status. They need approval, right? So they over ask, they over explain everything, right? And just saying, this is what I'm going to do. They explain it to see if it's okay, right? So you have your approval people, then you have your novelty people. They always want everything novel, right? New, right? They got to get the, you know, the newest. Well, actually, I have a 14, right? But they got to have the newest phones, the newest computers, right? And they have to show you all that stuff, right? And it's got to be new, right? If all of us play on Facebook, we see that where people are like, I've got this great new program that does this, right? Well, they just want to show you, you know, how novel it is. So it's important for them to be novel. They're going to dress different. They're going to look different, right? You know, they're going to walk around a conference in a nice suit and red gym shoes. That's me. Lately, they're red. They used to be white, right? But I mean, it's something to be novel, right? And if they get in a group that's a novel group, they got to be different in the novel group, right? And again, you know, a lot of people think someone's novel, they want to be different, when in fact they're seeking approval. I always think of like biker, Harley guys, right? Oh, I'm different. I'm rough, but they got to have the gear on. They're, you know, if their Harley buddies don't like them, they freak out, you know. So anyway, so you have your, you know, your novelty people. You got your intelligence people. They have to tell you how intelligent they are, right? What books they've read, the research, the degrees they have, the certifications. Okay? That's fine, you know, but I mean, and this is going deeper than just the visual auditory kinesthetic, all this other stuff. Now you're getting a three-dimensional outline of them, right? And so you have to just basically feed their intelligence, how smart they are, right? Now we have all of these. And depending on where you're at, one of these may come up. Then you have your pity people, right? They got to tell you their misfortunes, right? Oh, what was me? You know, this is going on, you know. Even if it's happening to everybody, like when, you know, the housing market crashed or the last recession or what's going on now, it's mainly them, and it's never their fault. Okay. And most people alienate pity people because a lot of human nature runs from pity. But the worst thing you can do to a pity person is to say, look at things to be grateful for. Or you list your gratitude. It's like, no, you know, you're in, and we all go through, you know, that pity party, the pity pot, whatever it is, right? But the ones that live there, right? I think it's Linus from Charlie Brown, the guy walking around with a little cloud above his head, right? But if you want to get in rapport with that, tell them how bad they got it. You know, tell them how bad they got it. Okay. So, and then last, you got your strength people. They got to show you how strong they are. Even though they may not, just like all these people, the ones that want to tell you how smart they are, sometimes the intelligence people aren't that bright, right? They just aren't. They want to appear bright. They have to prove that they're bright. Whether they are or not is irrelevant, right? Same with the strength people. You know, sounds cold, but I'm always thinking I see these guys that are got the big beer belly, no muscle tone, and they're wearing a skin tight Captain America shirt. That should be illegal, right? But it's like, I'm strong. I'm wearing a Captain America shirt, right? It's like, oh, good God, bro. You know, but they want to, you know, show that they're strong, right? And not just physical strength, it could be, you know, other types of strength. So they're usually very aggressive, assertive, right? Dominant. And again, each one of these people has fears. And if you so once you get a report, you can expose their fear, right? Because usually those kind of people go backwards up the list. The strength people, biggest fear is having you realize they're not strong. You know, and you can exploit that. Same with intelligence. It depends what you want to do. This is where it gets kind of scary. Same with, novelty. They're showing you their brand new iPhone 15, and you mention, well, it's already out of date. Because the 16's lined up for June, I think, right? Whatever it is, right? So, so what, you can exploit that. Oh, you're like everyone else. You're just one of those Harley guys. Whatever it happens to be. Same with approval. Look, they're easy to manipulate because, excuse me, you just work with withdrawal approval. Yeah. And then same with significance. If you point out how insignificant they really are in the grand scheme of things. So anyway, so this is the next level down, and this is the kind of stuff we'll be going into a little bit more detail, right? So again, all needs basically light up different parts of the brain. And then all your, if you want to get the compliance factor, if you want people to comply, you may have to first change their perception of what's going on, right? Or the context of what's going on, right? And then the next level is putting it in the right situation to give them the permission to do whatever the behavior is. Going back to the Milgram experiment, the perception was this was a person of authority, right? The context was in a lab environment. And then they had the permission because it helped that they couldn't see the other people. They could only hear them. And the person was given the order to up the shock, right? So if you can work with their perceptions, their, the context of, I understand why you did what you did, right? And then you need to, from the investigation side, give them the permission to go back and say, they did this to prove they were smart. They did this to prove they were strong. The person had it coming. And then we'll also be talking a lot about, what factors run through, whether you want to call them, I would call them like decision strategies or what's going on, right? We already have like toward, away from, all of those things, which you get great stuff. But also, what programs are running into back people's head, which kind of goes to the neurological needs, right? So if you got to make a decision, there's some, what patterns are they running in the back of their head? Do they want to be defiant? Do they want to be deviant from the norm, right? So you point out, if you want somebody to take action, you're thinking, I did this one yesterday with someone on the phone, I know you don't know if hypnosis would work for you for this, and it's not for everybody. You have to be able to deviate from the norm. And the reason I said that is this person had a master's degree, lives in Florida, and they work as a server in a good restaurant because they make more money doing that. And in the course of gathering information, it was important for this person to do something different, right? So, or, they'll run through the pattern of, is this decision going to make me look and stand out, to be novel, to be different, But then you have the people that they only do things when it's a necessity, right? They'll show you my wife's like this, right? She'll show you her iPhone 8 and it has all these problems. But she goes, why would I upgrade? It works. And she won't till it breaks. Billy's a necessity person, right? It's like, but it's not new. I don't care. It works, right? So you have your are they running, is it a necessity for it? If you make it a necessity, they're going to do whatever it is you want them to do, right? And then you get the people that want to conform to whatever social group they have to be a part of, right? You don't want to be the only, if you go to the certain parts of Florida, and they'll remain nameless, the villages, it's like you drive, everybody looks the same. They're dressed pretty much the same. You see it in certain subdivisions. You know, if you're a conformity person, you love gated communities with homeowners association because it's conform. You know, see all the guys leaving in the morning, you know, they're getting in their BMWs, their Mercedes, you know, their Volvos, they're dressed pretty much the same way, and that's conformity, right? Somebody who likes novelty will not fit in a homeowners association, right? But if conformity is important, and it can be very good if you're a conformist person, you'll excel in the military, you'll excel in the, you know, certain government bureaucracies, certain corporate structures, because as much as they say they want innovation and new thought, they will destroy innovation and new thought, right? Look at Hollywood in America, Bollywood in India. We want new ideas as long as it's exactly like we've done before. Because the people that get to that level are conformists, right? Then you have people that are running through the social thing, social needs of not social needs, but will this, you know, help my place in the social network? Yeah, in the social things, a little bit with conformist, and all these kind of begin to go together when you lay it out in like a flow chart. You know, deviance people tend toward novelty. Novelty people, of course, can be deviant, but then they might only do things for necessity. Necessity people, you know, might flow into conformity. They're going to conform because it's necessary, right? Social people, those social groups that get involved, you know, it's important to show their social, like, you know, they'll put the political things on their lawn, you know, they got to do the socially correct thing. Then you got a few people that everything is an investment, and investment people kind of go with necessity. You know, will this give me a return on investment? And not just financially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, right? A true investment person can cut old friends off because they no longer serve them, right? And so, you know, if you know this, then you can go in there and get the next level of things that are going on, right? And so I'm putting together this course. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm working on the exact dates. That'll be for the recording. That'll be in the link below, the dates that I do it. Of course, it'll be recorded. And the first one will be like a beta test. So it'll go out and then I tweak it and go through it, you know, because I'm kind of a novelty person. I just want to do it, get it done. And I'm, you know, the necessity is a date and a launch time, because this is what drives me, right? You know, so again, you know, basic NLP is the X-ray. This stuff is almost like surgery or opening them up, or with MRIs now, you know, you can see on the inside clearly. You know, I'm just reading, they were saying that with the recent advances in MRIs, hopefully pretty soon, colonoscopies will be a thing of the past, right? Of course, you got the pushback from the people that are invested in it, but if you could just lay in a machine and they can do they're getting the, if not better results, according to the, you know, the little thing I read, right? You know, same as why you always see in the sports teams, because they got millions of dollars invested in the football players, soccer player, baseball. When they're injured, 30 years ago, they had exploratory surgery to look at the knee injury. Well, they don't have to do that now. They give them an MRI, right? X-ray on the, you know, at the stadium. Now the stadiums even have MRI machines, right? So they know what's going on underneath the surface, right? And, you know, so it's going to change how you look at things, how you do that. So that's what's coming up. And then when eventually it will be part of the new master practitioner of NLP. It'll be a big part of it, right? To separate us from everybody else, you know? So it's, again, it's based on some really cool information from intelligence agencies, the FBI, some of the military, how they train, what they do, right? And again, we don't have the same resources and the abilities to do what they do, control movement and things like that, but we can do some magic that they can't. So that's the class. Look on the info below. It'll be coming up. It's going to be a 12 to 16-hour course with a lot of homework because, you know, the way you get the skills is to not just learn the skills, but practice the skills. But again, the danger is it changes how you look at everyone around you, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. But also it gives you a little bit more, sometimes empathy, right? Because you realize everybody's broken at some level. So, you know, what's driving them to do whatever it is, you know, and especially if you're able to pull back and become like an actor at times and become a blank slate, which sometimes is easier said than done. At least I'll say in my life, it's easier said than done, right? Because when your neurology lights up, it's kind of interesting, right? And again, when you look at how they learned a lot of this info, you know, it was only back in the 70s that the FBI started the behavioral profiling unit by studying serial killers, right, and other criminals, give a behavioral profile. Well, that opened up a whole different field, which works in different things, which also, what makes a good FBI agent? What makes a good CIA agent? What makes a good, you know, military operative at different levels, right? You know, what's the difference between the operating profile of a high performance military, Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, Marine Recon, those guys, and a regular Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine? What's the difference? There's a behavioral profiling difference, right? And so they, you know, they're getting pretty good at even estimating who's going to do good at some things, right? Because I do know in the, you know, certain things, we're learning more all the time. So if you look for information, reach out, click on the link below, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's still haven't quite worked out the final title, but it's basically behavioral profiling or behavioral compliance methodology based on this next level of NLP, which is neurologically based. So talk to you soon.